There was a young man, and he had been given a parrot, and he was kind of excited about that, and the parrot talked. And after he brought it home, the parrot started to talk to him, and he was a little surprised because the parrot was swearing at him. And then it started yelling at him, and cursing and yelling, and all day long it would just be a mean-spirited parrot. Well, the man got a little frustrated with him and started to yell back and say, "You don't talk to me like that." And he started yelling. Well, the parrot got even more belligerent and started yelling even louder and swearing even more. And the man just kept swearing and yelling back, and finally got so frustrated, he grabbed the parrot, opened up the freezer, and stuck him in. And he walked away. And the parrot started squawking and screaming inside. And after about a minute, it stopped. The man got kind of nervous, like, "Oh my gosh, I might have hurt the parrot." So he ran back, and he opened up the door, and the parrot flew over and landed on his arm and said, "I would like to ask for forgiveness. I was wrong, inappropriate, and my behavior was inexcusable. Would you please forgive me?" But then the parrot said, "But I have one question. What did the turkey do?" We're in the midst of a lot of changes here, but I'm not going to throw you into a freezer. Change is in the air. Change is tough, though. It's tough to make that radical change in our lives when we need to. But I'm the kind of person who's actually pretty quick with adaptation. I can adapt pretty easily. I'm quick with change. I've developed that skill. In preaching, I have this weird thing in my head that goes on. It's a very strange thing. I can actually, as I'm preaching the word, I can actually be watching how you all are reacting and adjusting and thinking about what you're doing, and then somehow at the same time I'm preparing how to change what I'm about to say so it fits how you all are. It's a really weird three-part mind that goes on when I'm up here. It's really odd. But when in normal life, I can't do that. I could barely think one thing, right? But it happens. And so I've had this skill to be able to do that. And I probably learned that in my childhood. I'm the son of a pastor. And so every 5 to 6 years we moved. And what did you have to do? You had to have a new room. You had to learn the new place you went to. You had to make new friends. You had new teachers. All these things. So I had to either learn how to adapt or be left behind. Well, my parents wouldn't leave me behind, but you know what I'm saying. And so, to me, it comes easily, but for many, it does't. And this has taken on a real meaning for me this year. I just moved a couple months ago from where I was in Naperville, Aurora area to here, have a new church. I was a district superintendent, and now I'm back to a local church, and that's a big shift. All that kind of things. Well, in my family, it means even more because my son graduated from Missouri and moved back here to this area. So he moved in this year. That my niece is moving from her place to college now. My sister, who is a professor at Purdue, is now a dean at Ohio University. So they're up and moving right now. And my father moved 2 days ago. We've been packing and unpacking, packing and unpacking. And so it's really been a big change in my life and the lives of those that I love and who are around me. We've been mightily uprooted this year. But I'd like you to, first of all, before we go on, I want you to meet my dad. He's here. He's the Reverend Billy Bross, and he's a retired United Methodist pastor, and hopefully going to be a Bible study leader here. And I was going to say, I hope that he'll take on some sermons for me, but I don't want him to, because then you won't want me back, because he's that good a preacher. So, Reverend Billy Bross, where are you? Would you stand up? Do you mind? That's my dad. So, one of the things he asked me to do was grow this church. Well, I just did by one. Unless you don't come back, Dad. Please come back. But thank you to the generosity and support and love that you've already shown him as well with the meals that you provided for his move. So I guess adaptability is in my nature, just because of all that I've lived through and grown up in. And maybe that's why I really like the octopus. I love the octopus. They have this crazy ability to change their appearance in milliseconds to either hunt or to be protected. And we're going to see an octopus, just a brief, this is what an octopus can do. Quickly, do you see how quickly that octopus could change colors? And then if you watch closely, the skin actually moved and changed. They have this uncanny ability to do that. They have chromatophores, which is little things in their skin that can make colors change on their outside of their skin. In fact, many octopi, whatever, an octopus can change its color to hundreds and thousands of different color schemes. And then they have this muscle ability, little tiny muscles all over, that they can actually move pieces of their skin out to make it look like rocks or coral. And they can blend in almost perfectly. Whenever I've scuba dived, when I go scuba diving, it's really fun when you see an octopus because they're hard to find, they're hard to see. And those of you who scuba dive too, I know you know that too. So octopus is really cool, right? But they may change their outer appearance to protect themselves, but they're still an octopus. They still are the same octopus that they were when they were dark brown or white, or when they had coral-looking skin or smooth. They're still the same octopus. And change is important, but we also have to have a foundation for the change to happen. Change with a foundation allows us to adapt while becoming better Christians. Now let's begin with change. If we're to speak the truth, as I hit my 40s and into my 50s now, I'm having a harder time changing. I'm not as adaptable as I was. And we know that from experts. They say the older you get, the harder it is for you to what? Change. Now, the generations before me, in their 30s and 20s and teens, change is almost just a part of who they are. They embrace it. They love it. It's a big deal. They can do it very easily. But we know the church is like a giant yacht, a giant ship out on the ocean. It doesn't turn on a dime. The church is one of the last things to adapt and change, and we know that's to be true. The church has difficulty changing to the world, changing how it does things. And ever since I've arrived here, a lot of what I've heard has been lamenting back to the 1980s when we had 150 youth here. Can it just be like it used to be? Can it just be like it used to be when we had 3 worship services? Probably not. At least not right away. Soon, but not right away. We look at the glory days of what it used to be and say, oh, if only it could be. I mean, with youth ministry, for example, you just had to sneeze in church and 150 youth would show up. You know, back in the days, the glory days of church. But we have to learn, how do we attract youth? How do we mentor and minister to youth in today's climate, in today's world? How do we do that to adults? How do we do that with others? How do we do it to new people who are seeking God in a way? Are we providing what they need to hear, but yet what is the foundation upon which we stand? We can't just change everything about who we are, because then we won't be who we are anymore. We won't be the church. There are foundations that are important. And we saw in the scripture what Jesus talked about. What's the greatest commandment? What do you say? Is to love who? And then secondly, to love one another, right? Love God, love one another. That's it. That's what he says. Everything else rests upon that. That's the very foundation of what we are to be as Christians, what we are to be as a church. All the other stuff is fluff. Not fluff, but not as important. The foundation is the love of God, love of one another. And so we need to know who we are as a church for our foundation. And I think we know that. We are a church that loves each other. I've said this to you, pound for pound, and I've seen every church in this conference. I visited every single church. I supervised 65 of them. You are probably the nicest, kindest congregation I've ever met. And I'm not kidding. You are sweet people. You're the kind of church that I would join if I weren't a pastor. I'm forced to be here by the bishop. But I would join you. And so, as we take that and understand, okay, this is who we are. We're kind. We love Jesus. We love each other. We want to love our neighbors. We want to love the other. We want to be that kind of church. But how do we do it? How is it that we do it when the world is changing around us? There are new ways that we must adapt to make people come and find the love of Christ. And it can happen. We can change many things about this church without fundamentally changing who we are. God isn't done with us yet. Now, usually I like to end my sermon with good news. I'm not done yet. But usually I like to end it with good news. But I want to put good news in the middle. Gracie Allen, who is the George Burns' wife, on her deathbed, near her death, she said, "Don't put a period where God has put a comma. God is still speaking. God is speaking now, even in the midst of change. And the world is changing. It's changing faster and faster and faster." But hear this. Change isn't just a human condition that we have to address. Jesus came to change. Jesus came to bring change. Jesus called us to change. We hear in Matthew 5, we hear him say this: "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill." Meaning, the foundation is there, but I've come to show you a new way to understand and to live it so that it is fully fulfilled. He then goes on to share a wonderful repeated formula right after that. "And you have heard what it is said," he says, "but I say." You have heard it said this way, but I tell you this. 6 times he says that. The foundation that remains the same were the commandments and the laws of the people of God, but what he changed was how people responded to them. Keep in mind that these laws were that he was clarifying and reorienting the people were those that they followed for thousands of years. So no wonder it was difficult for them to accept Jesus. He came in to tell them a new way. Now, the gospel we heard today from Matthew 22 comes long after Jesus had been teaching and sharing change. So to say it a little bit differently, the greatest foundation is to love God and love others. Upon this rests everything else we do. How we do it is less important than why we do it. How we love is less important than why we do it. Kodak, you know the company Kodak, right? Any of you have ever had a Kodak camera, and what'd you do? You had to take it, you had to take out the stuff, make sure that no light hit it, hide it under, and go to Walgreens or whatever, and hand it in, hope that the pictures turned out well, and you didn't waste your roll, right? That's the way we used to do it, right? Well, if you think about that, by the way, I said Walgreens. Did you know that the tallest chapel in the world is actually in Chicago? In downtown Chicago, called the Temple. It's called the Chapel in the Sky. It's the United Methodist. We have the skyscraper right next to Daley Plaza, and we own that building, and we have a church there, and the Chapel in the Sky is there. And it was mostly funded and built by the Walgreens family. Kind of cool. We're going to take a field trip there, so join me sometime. We are. You can come and join me. But that's the way we used to do. And then a guy named Steven Sasson was a part of Kodak, and he actually developed the technology for the digital camera in 1975. And it looked like this. Can you imagine carrying that around? Okay, smile. That was a prototype. But that was the technology. And Kodak put a lot of money into the technology and patented all of that. But then it said, we're really a print company. We really want to do more prints. That's what we are. And so they just kept printing. They put that in a vault, and they never brought it out. Mark Zuckerberg, who was one of the founders of Facebook, said this. He said, if Kodak would have actually run with that camera and that technology, we would still be using Kodak today. But Kodak went out of business because it failed to adapt. It failed to realize that its core purpose was to make beautiful pictures, not to do print pictures. That was how they did it. Why was to make beautiful pictures. And if they would have adapted themselves, they would have moved away from print to digital, and they would still be alive and probably would be really, really doing everything that you would have, including your cell phones with technology, would be Kodak technology. So this sounds very familiar about change, right? It's hard. And it reminds me of a story of a woman that I spoke with. I was at a conference, and she was telling me about her church. And she was an elderly woman, and she was in a city church. And they were the kind of church that was probably like this years ago when we had 3 services. It was packed. It was a traditional worship experience in all 3. And it just did a lot of things. Back in the glory days where, again, everybody went to church who was a Christian. And so she was telling me about the church. Well, it had suffered so much because of the times that by the time she was at her age in her late 80s, the church had dwindled down to about 15 people in worship. So they had to make a decision. Do we close or do we stay open? And they decided that they wanted to stay open. But they knew that they had to change. So somebody was brought in to teach them how to change, how to adapt. And they did. And one of the things that they found out they needed to do, because they were in the city and there were so many young adults around, that the style of music and the style of worship wasn't going to work for those people, and they had to change it. Now, don't worry, I'm not trying to say I'm going to make massive changes here yet. But they had to change the style they did worship in some capacity. And so they talked about it, and they said, well, either we're going to die because no one's coming to the style that we're doing now, or we do that and we see what happens. And so they decided to do it. And so they had some foundation money. They put it towards a praise band. They put up screens, which they never would have done before. They did all that type of thing. And a couple people started to come in and see it, and a few more and a few more. And pretty soon the place was packed with people. And I asked her, well, how did you overcome that? And, wasn't that terrible that you missed it? She goes, well, it didn't bother me that much. I said, she said, the music was really loud, and I didn't really like that, but it was so great to see all these people here. That mattered more than the music that I wanted to listen to, and I could always listen to my hymns at home. And then she went on to say, and I could take out my hearing aids. So I thought that was pretty cool. But what was neat about this wasn't it just like they gave up everything and it went away. What was awesome was what she told me later, which was as younger people came in and we started to have a relationship with them and we're so excited that we're all together, then actually we had people coming in from the outside who were older as well, and we started to have a multi-generational worship. And the younger people came in and said, can we do some hymns? And so they started to incorporate, and they became this beautifully blended worship experience where everybody got to experience and they appreciated each other. I thought that was a beautiful example of what it is to adapt because they understood their core purpose, their why. And I'm going to lift up my dad one more time. He's one of the persons that I look up to the most in this position. Well, right now I'm taller than him, so I'm looking down a little bit. But he did a thing in La Crosse when he was a pastor at La Crosse, which I thought was really cool. They had a little parking strip along the side that was right by the door to come in, and there was, when he first got there, a big sign up on, bolted into the wall that said, "Pastor parking only." And he took it down. He said, "I should not be singled out as better than anyone else." And I don't think he parked there. I don't know if I'm wrong about that, but I don't think you ever parked there even in that spot. He purposely said, I'm going to change that culture. We're not a pastor-centric church. We're a lay-led church. And under his leadership, it thrived. That's the kind of thing that we need to do here as well. So I want to be transparent. I'm not saying next week we're going to change things. I'm not saying I'm going to come in and take away the things that feed you. We're not. But we are being called to learn and adapt. Scripture tells us that now, on this year, that we only know only in part. We cannot dare to say that we know all things. We do not. So we cannot say that adapting is bad. It's good. It's potentially good. Now we have to be smart about it. We have to do the right thing. And I'm a real example of how change can be good. I, growing up, hated Brussels sprouts. Oh, the smell drove me insane. Hated Brussels sprouts. And then one day I was out at a meal with some people that I didn't want to offend, and they brought out Brussels sprouts. And I said, oh, I got to try it. All right, I got to eat a couple, because they're really proud of their Brussels sprouts. So I ate a few, and I liked them. And now I make them a lot. I changed. We all can change, right? Beautiful thing about change is that while we are changing, we can still hold on to our foundational beliefs. Change allows us a fresh start, new beginnings, and a way to grow and become bigger and better as human beings, as Christians, and as disciples of Jesus Christ. If the thing that we do new or change that helps to further our purpose for Jesus Christ, for the transformation of the world, why wouldn't we try it? If the things that we do new or the change that we make helps people become, belong, and believe from anywhere, why not? If the thing that we do new or change that we make has it at its core love God and love others, then it's probably worth trying. Now, I brought out a chair because I want it to be a symbol for us. There's two symbols here. One is our cocoon. Is holding a caterpillar, a real caterpillar. No, it's not real, but it's a cocoon to symbolize that this caterpillar is inside, getting ready to grow, and it's changing and metamorphosing, and it's eventually going to come out. But it's got to struggle through the cocoon to get out. If we came up and helped that butterfly out of there, it probably wouldn't make it. It needs that struggle of change to change into who it is so it can fly away and become strong enough. And that's just like us. Right now, we're probably in somewhat of a cocoon, but we're starting to break through and we want to get out. And that means we're going to change. But then our wings will open up and we will fly and it will feel good. And it will be right. And then we have a symbol of a chair, empty. Because there are people who need to sit in that chair. And if we give up a little bit of us, give up a little bit of ourselves, so that someone else can come in and sit in that chair and bring a little bit of them to us, oh, what a good thing that would be. Teach me, I would ask you, because you know things I don't know. I want to learn from you, because I don't know everything. You don't know everything, but together we can know a whole lot more. There are people that way that are struggling with the meal, struggling to provide food on the table. We can help them, not just by giving them food, but allowing them a wonderful place to be. There's someone over here who's probably going through a divorce, and they need a church that won't judge them. There's someone this way that just was diagnosed with cancer, and boy, do they need a support group. Someone this way that may have just lost a loved one, and they need a Stephen minister, or they need a grief group. We can be that church for them. But if we don't adapt somewhat and allow for change, that seat might remain empty. And woe to us that we didn't do all that we could to share God's love to others. People of God, change is tough, but change can be good. We'll be doing some changes. But I think if we keep our core, we'll be happy. You're good people. And I love you.